Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Barajas. I'm a pre-health advisor here at Health Professions Advising. And today I'm going to talk about writing secondaries and supplemental essays. So I'm going to cover as many different health fields as possible. But to get started, which health field are y'all going into? You can put your answer in the chat. MD, DO, MD, and vet med. Okay, great. All right, I got a little bit of variety. Um, And again, of course, if you have any questions specific to your field or anything else, please feel free to raise your virtual hand or put your question in the chat. Um, let's get started here. So this is a very general applicant timeline overview. I wanted to start with this because sometimes it can be confusing as to when secondaries or supplementals are required or when they even come out. So we are currently in April here. Usually applications, well, VEMCAS for vet med already opened back in January, but you won't be able to submit until later. And AMCAS and ACOMAS for MD and DO schools opens at the beginning of May, or both of them open at the beginning of May. And you'll be able to submit either right away for DO or at the end of May for MD schools. So then once you submit your primary application for, let's just go with MD schools for now. Once you submit your primary application, starting again at the end of May, what they're doing, what AMCAS will be doing, which is the MD application, is verifying transcripts. So they will check to make sure that the transcript that you submit to them, all of the transcripts that you submit from your undergrad and graduate courses match exactly with what you've put into your application. And so that will be done. That's all they're going to be doing between May 27th and June 27th, the specific dates this year. And so during that time, you won't be getting any secondaries. We'll talk a little bit about some strategies of what you can do during that time. But the first date that you could receive secondaries for MD schools would be on June 27th. Now that depends, and we'll also get into this later, it depends on the school if you'll receive it right away versus later. But that's the timeline for MD. Some of the DO ones you'll get right away. They will be available in your application. This is called ACOMAS. When you select a school for your list in ACOMAS to apply to, there will be a section called program materials, and there will be more information about those secondary, they'd be called supplementals for pretty much any other application system. And then that'll be similar for VEMCAS and a lot of the other application systems, is that as soon as you add a school, you can look in the different tabs under that school's information and find, usually it's under something called questions. And then there'll be a series of questions that you would need to answer. Some of them would be maybe multiple choice, like what's your background? What's your, like, have you applied to this school before? Things like that. And then they may also have some essay questions, and those would be called supplementals. And so that would be around this time for VEMCAS. We usually recommend submitting your primary no later than about August 15th, because then you'll need to be verified by September 15th. I think that's pretty much the date that happens every year. And during that time, you can also be working on your supplementals as well. So generally, supplementals and secondaries will be during this time, somewhere between May and August. For MD and DO school, for MD schools, we recommend trying to submit your primary applications and get your secondary applications done sometime before, probably by the end of July, by the middle of August at the latest, because that is rolling admissions. And then for vet med, again, submitting your application ideally by the middle of August. Okay, and then So secondaries and supplementals, they're basically the same thing. They're just additional questions, but they call them something, they call them different names. Um, and so for medical schools, or I should say, specifically for MD schools, secondaries are sent out by each school you apply to after your primary application is submitted and verified, which is what I was talking about in the previous slide. They may be sent out automatically. So you may get, depending on how many schools you've applied to in your primary, when you submit your primary application, you may get kind of a pile of secondaries all at the same time. Um, so they may be sent out automatically as soon as you get verified and the med schools receive your application information. They just automatically send a secondary, or it could be after a screening process, which could be something like for the UC Davis Medical School. They usually take a little bit longer to screen applications before sending out secondaries. For other health professions and for DO schools, like I was saying before, supplementals are usually embedded in the primary application in the program materials section, or they may be sent out after an initial screening. So it just depends on the program. They can vary widely in length requirements and number of questions. So it might just be one long question, one short question, several short questions, several long questions. It can be very, very different between schools and also between different fields. Um, Essentially, what they're meant to do is give schools a chance to ask you specific questions that they want to know. So when you're sending in a primary application, all schools will see everything that you submit in your experiences, descriptions, in your personal statement, which is why for most fields, some fields there's a few exceptions where you would write a personal statement specifically for each school, but most of them you're going to write one main personal statement, for example, that all schools will see. And so this is a chance for them to ask things like, why did you apply to our school? What are you interested in at our school specifically? Or why should we choose you? And so again, going with the last thing on the list here, they're meant to augment what you've already submitted in your primary. So in addition to your personal statement, your experience descriptions, your letters of rec, all these other things that are coming in, they will also have these supplemental or secondary essays to read. Now, some schools don't have any. Some schools don't have any kind of supplemental or secondary, or they might have just the simple kind of questions, like I mentioned before, of have you applied here before, or um, any like maybe demographic information that they might want to know. And another thing to note is that with secondaries or supplementals, sometimes there can be an additional, well, most of the time there can be an additional cost. So they will often send out these secondary invitations to fill out, and then you would also need to submit money to the school that sent you those secondaries or supplementals. Any questions so far? Okay. Um, so different deadlines. For MD schools, you want to aim to submit your secondaries within 2 weeks of receiving them. So for example, if you received a whole pile of them on June 27th, you'd want to aim to submit those within 2 weeks of that date. That's not usually a hard and fast deadline unless the schools specify that. But we highly recommend doing that because then once you submit your secondaries, the admissions committees will view your entire application as a whole and decide whether they want to invite you for an interview. So the sooner you can get that done, the better. But you also want to make sure that you're doing a good job on your secondaries. So sometimes it might take people a little bit longer, and that can be totally fine. And then for other health professions and for DO schools, supplementals may be due upon submission of your primary or at a date that's specific to each school. It just depends on what their individual requirements are. And so sometimes people get very overwhelmed with the thought of having, like, if they apply to maybe 20 or 30 MD schools, potentially getting 20 or 30 secondaries all in one day. So we have some ways to kind of sort through what you have, prepare ahead of time, but there are also some strategies for applying. So you could potentially apply to maybe 10 medical schools, MD schools. I'll talk about that specifically first. you could apply to 10 MD schools and then get those secondaries, get those submitted, and then apply to 10 more, or however many you want to do in one batch. But that's another possibility in order to make sure that you're getting all of those secondaries out in time. And then for other health professions, it could be something similar. So you could submit your primary application, for example, for PA schools. I often have people who say, oh, there's just so many essays that I need to write. I don't want to delay my primary application, so I can get it verified. So you can, like the MD schools, you can submit it with one school, get it verified. And in the meantime of getting verified, you could also be working on drafting for some of the um, supplemental questions that you know are going to be coming. Um, and then after getting verified, then they can start adding more schools in as they are able to do and process through the questions that are required. So some strategies. I mentioned a couple already, but I'll go through them here. So definitely keep track of secondary questions in some kind of main document with like the prompt, with the deadline, with the word count, character count, whatever kind of other requirements. What we do recommend, and I'm sure they talked about this in the making a school list presentation as well, but you can keep track of the schools that you're going to apply to in a spreadsheet. So for example, you could put all the names of the schools you plan to apply to in the left column, and then the top row could be all the different things that you need, like which letters of recommendation you need, any outstanding prereqs that you have, any other requirements, something about their mission statement, their vision statement. So it can be all the things that they require of you, but it can also keep track of things that you are looking for in schools. So that could be something like maybe they have a strong focus on volunteering or community service, or maybe they have a strong focus on creating more access to care, or they have research opportunities that you're interested in, or anything. It's really anything that interests you in the school. While you're making your school list, it's going to come in handy when you start writing your secondaries, because as we'll see in the next slide, there can be a lot of questions about why do you want to attend our school. You'll also get that question in interviews, so it's a good thing to start thinking about why do you want to attend this school very specifically. And so you can also add those secondary questions maybe in that same document or create a new one, whatever you feel like works best for you. And then another thing that you can try is to, for example, if there's a question of what kind of diversity do you bring to our program, we'll talk more about that question in a few minutes. You can brainstorm for that topic in one main document, and then just draw from that material for each question that's related to that, because they might all be a little bit different. They might have different length requirements, different focus, but they might all generally be related to diversity. And so if you have all those ideas in one place, then you, again, can draw from that drafting and information that you have down in there. And then this is something that I talk about a lot when I'm working with people on their personal statements. So if I've worked with any of you, you may have heard this multiple times, but even if you don't use something for your draft or from a draft for your personal statement or for your experience descriptions, I recommend not throwing away any writing, because it could come in handy for your writing your secondaries. So if there's a story that you really liked that just didn't fit into the character count for your personal statement, or it didn't work, didn't fit into the character count for your experience section either, could be something that you bring into a secondary or even for an interview question too. So I always recommend just keep it somewhere else. And then once you get to these questions, you might think, oh, now I know exactly where to put that story. And you already have it written, which is great. You can also try pre-writing based on previous year's questions and common prompts. So I was only able to find, I know this one is specifically for med schools, but you can look around for other fields, general questions that they might have. I couldn't find anything that I felt was representative of all the different fields, like in one place or individually for each field. But something similar to a page like this, where like this does include MD and DO, which is nice. But there could be other ones for PA or dental or vet med that would be helpful for people. So this one keeps track of what questions have been asked in any given year, or really for like the previous year, basically. And then usually they update them if they are changed. So like this one, if it comes out that Alabama Com changes one of their or some of their questions, then this would be updated as soon as it's released to anyone, which I like that they keep it updated like that. And so you might see here, for example, that University of Alabama has quite a few different questions. They have a couple of optional questions. We always get the question of, do I need to do the optional thing? If you feel like there's something else that you want to say, then by all means. But if it doesn't apply to you or you feel like it's not really necessary, then you don't have to fill out the things that are optional. But I feel like this is a good representation of a few different ones. So where do you see yourself 15 to 20 years from now? So it's a future facing question. What do you feel like you would add to the learning environment? It's kind of along the lines of, why should we choose you? Describe a patient interaction, something you saw, something you did, and community service experience. So we know here that they value community service experience. And that hopefully would have been part of this person's, whoever's applying to this school, their selection process of how to choose a school. And what prepares you for our unique learning environment, and then these optional questions. So again, as you can see, there's quite a bit of range. So like this one had 5 main questions. This one has 3. They range a lot in length, like the AT Still School of Osteopathic Medicine, 500 words for each one, which is quite a bit of writing. But hopefully, as you get through a lot of the writing for these, you'll find that there are some things you can recycle and use again. You can use some very similar things between schools. They're not going to check between each other to see if someone has used the same material for their questions. I think they would expect that you would do that. So let's see. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this to your attention for the MD and DO schools. And also this will be pretty similar to, like I was saying, some of the other healthcare fields or healthcare professions, professional schools. They will be similar questions. They will be similar range of length and number of questions and things like that. So going back here, you bring this back up. There we go. Okay. So definitely you can use these kind of websites as long as you know that it's a good, reputable website. Sometimes they'll also be on the school's websites, and so you can find more information there about what they've done previously. And y'all may have heard through our app prep series or just otherwise about the pre-professional competencies. These are based through the through AMCAS or AAMC for MD schools, but we feel like they are highly transferable and relevant to any kind of health profession. And so we recommend highlighting some of these things throughout your personal statement, your experience descriptions, and in your secondaries. And you don't need to name them directly. You don't need to say, I had service orientation in this experience, or you should accept me because I have cultural awareness. But you can show these things through the stories that you tell and through the information that you provide. But there's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind of like, well, maybe I can word this story in a way that would highlight a few more of these things about myself that they're probably looking for. Okay, and I've already mentioned a few common questions, but we'll go into a little bit more detail about these. So how do you bring diversity to our school? That's the basic diversity question. I have a couple more specific ones in another slide. Do you have a connection to Northern or Central California? That would be for UC Davis. That is their one of their supplemental questions. Write an autobiography, which is a really fun one. That's for UC San Diego's med school. It is 6,000 characters. Why are you applying to our school? So like I was mentioning before, keeping track of why you're choosing the schools on your list so that you can answer this question in a lot of depth. For example, I'm applying to your school because you have this program or this feature, whatever it is. I have a specific interest in this feature for these reasons. Maybe I've done these things before, or this is part of what I want to do as a doctor in the future or as a vet in the future. Therefore, I'm applying to your school. And so you can then go through several different parts of their program that are drawing you to them. And then why should we accept you can be actually a similar-ish approach as to why you want them. You can say something like, your program focuses or has a strong focus on community service and creating access to care. And I've done these things in XYZ ways. And I would bring my perspective to your program in this way, or whatever it is that you want to highlight about yourself. And then they could be something like, tell us about a personal challenge you faced in your life. I like this one where you've demonstrated resilience and grit, but not talking about the MCAT. And then if you could present yourself to the admissions committee, what would you want to make sure they knew about you? So these are just a few questions. I don't know, I already showed you a few from the other website as well. And okay, so the diversity question can be difficult sometimes for people because they may be thinking of diversity in a limited sense of background or ethnicity, but diversity can mean a lot of different things. It can mean background and ethnicity, of course, but it can also mean language diversity. It can mean diversity of thought. Maybe you majored in something different than a lot of the other applicants to their program. Maybe you majored in anthropology or sociology or philosophy, and you feel like you would bring a different perspective of a lot of things to their program. That would be a great thing to talk about. It could also be having worked with a lot of different people in some of your experiences. Having worked with a lot of different patients, or in the case of vet med, a lot of different clients, community members. And so looking through some of these questions, oops, that's not what I meant to do. So they're asking, for example, learning from others is enhanced in educational settings that include individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Please describe personal characteristics that would add to the educational experience of others. And you may notice that this is a little bit similar even to, go back a little bit, to why should we accept you? So you may find that if, for example, the school doesn't ask a diversity question, but you already have an answer to this question for another school that you feel like would work well for why should we accept you, just changing it a little bit, then that can be, a lot of your drafting and ideas already done, which is awesome. So sometimes there's a little bit of crossover between different questions and how you can maximize the work that you've already done. They may also ask specific things like UA College of Medicine Phoenix practices inclusive excellence. How are you going to pursue this inclusive excellence in your studies? And so you want to obviously directly address that question or address inclusive excellence in your answer, but with something very specific about yourself. And then write about things in your background that have been important to your development or been challenging to you. They do give you some ideas here. So for example, if you started with this one, this could give you some ideas on how to draft this kind of question, and then you could use the same material for another question that might not have sparked as many ideas because they didn't have this list of possible things you could talk about. Um, but essentially, you could use the same general material from, for example, that main brainstorming document that I mentioned before for all three of these questions, just making sure that you're specifically addressing each part of the question so that it doesn't feel like it was written for someone else and then just kind of like changed here and there. But like actually you thought through, like, is this still addressing this other prompt? Um, and okay, any questions here or anything that I've just talked about?
Should the secondaries kind of carry on the same ideas that your personal statement fostered, or is it better to kind of like show different sides of you and maybe bring up new things in the secondary?
Yeah, you can have a balance. You wouldn't want to be repeating yourself. So if you have a similar experience that you're talking about in both, then you'd want to say something different about it or tell a different story than what you talked about in your personal statement. But you can have similar ideas, definitely. And we can help you to balance between what you have in your personal statement, what you have in your experience descriptions, and what you eventually put into your secondaries. Of like, oh, this feels a little bit repetitive. Let's try something different. Um, and we can help you balance that too. Did that address your question?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right. So there are also adversity questions, for example. Tell us about a time you failed at something, challenges you faced, any adversity you faced. So these could be all the same story that you use for three different schools questions, potentially. Again, just making sure that you address each part of the prompt and also think about with adversity questions, you'll get a lot of these for interviews as well. And I don't know if anyone's heard of the STAR method for answering these types of questions. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result or results. And you can find information about that on Google or any kind of search engine. But that is a good way to approach these questions. So explaining what happened, what you needed to do about it, what you did do about it, and then what was the result. And then I like to think that there's an extra R at the end of reflection because they don't just want to hear the story. They also want to know, why are you telling me this story in particular? What do you want me to know about you that's going to tell me that you, even though you failed at things, you know how to figure out what went wrong. You don't give up. You ask for help. And you're going to continue to do that in medical school or vet school and as a veterinarian or a doctor in the future. So kind of taking a step further after that too. And so you can address those things in these written questions, and then of course also in your interview questions later on. And sometimes people feel like, oh, well, I haven't really faced any adversity, or I don't have any challenges. But usually there's something that they can use. So I've had people talk about, a time when they didn't meet a goal in their weightlifting. And can I really use that? Yeah, totally. Because that means that they had to figure out, what went wrong, why they didn't meet that goal, and then they changed something like their nutrition or their training or whatever it was, and they did better the next time. So it doesn't always have to be something life changing to include it here. Of course, you can put life changing things too, but sometimes people get a little bit stopped up of maybe they don't want to share something about their experiences, and that's totally fine. There's nothing that you have to talk about in your application if you're not comfortable with it, but we'll definitely come and talk to us and we can figure out something in your experiences that you could include here. Okay. And then some writing strategies and tips. So definitely the most important is to, of course, follow directions. So that would include the length, the word count, character count, prompt, and any other information like due date, and figuring out what exactly they're looking for with the question. So that could be also into the next one of breaking down prompts into checklists to make sure you address everything. Sometimes the prompts are very simple, like the ones in the last slide. Tell us about a time you failed at something, and that's it. But sometimes they're pretty long and they have a lot of different parts to them. And so what can be helpful is to even just press return after each sentence of the prompt. So you're separating out into each line, and then you can go through and make a checklist of all the things that you've addressed already. And then when you're brainstorming, and I would say this for any writing that you're doing for your application, try not to edit too much or worry about the character or word limit. Get your ideas on the page and then go from there. Come to us. We can help you sift through what you have and find the things that you really want to include. And again, if you are still writing your personal statement or your experience descriptions, also making sure to not throw anything away, even if you don't use it there. So definitely keep it and come back to it later and see, oh, this actually does work for this question. I'm going to use this, and now I don't have to worry about it as much. And then, okay, yeah, I guess I went into the next one already. Start writing early. So as I mentioned, I guess I talked a little bit about this strategy, but once you submit your primary application, then you can, like, once you get that out of the way, you can start drafting your secondaries. And like going to the website that I mentioned, or a website that would have more information about the specific schools that you're applying to. And just start drafting them out, writing as much as you can, but giving yourself some time to write those multiple drafts. And of course, coming to see us. You can see us in appointments, the 30-minute appointments that we have, or in drop-ins. We get a lot of people coming in for drop-ins. Well, these days, definitely we're pretty booked up. But definitely during secondary writing time, we have a lot of people coming in very often, like, how does this sound? Okay, let me make those changes. Okay, how does this sound the next day? So we can definitely help you through all of the writing and all of the drafting as well. And then, of course, so get help from all resources available to you. And then I say this, I say essay in the last one, but it could be just short answer, but start writing anywhere. It doesn't matter if you start with the introduction or if you start with the conclusion or somewhere in the middle. It just get your ideas out. So you're not just staring at a blank page and freaking out, which is what I used to do when I would have to write things. And I also wanted to mention, so also you can kind of like triage the questions that you're getting. So if you know that a question is going to take you a little bit more time to answer and to brainstorm, then like this would be more like after you start getting secondaries. If you know it's going to take you a little bit more time, like this is a new question that you haven't drafted other versions of, then maybe you set that one aside and you tackle some of the other ones that are going to be a little bit faster and easier, and you just get those in. And then you come back to this one. Obviously, not wanting to leave this one for too long, but sometimes it can be helpful to have that feeling of accomplishment of having submitted several secondaries already before going into that one and tackling a more difficult question. But it's up to you. If you want to tackle the more difficult one first, get that done, and then get all the easy ones done, then that works too. But definitely find a system that is going to work for you. Trying to think if there's other questions or other strategies as well. Oh, when you're answering these questions, as you probably noticed on the page that I showed you before, some of the questions are 150 words long, or some of the answers are 500 words long, or some of them are going to be 500 characters long, which is not very long. So you don't necessarily need to have the same essay structure as you would for a 500-word answer as you would for a 500-character answer. You don't necessarily need like an introduction, like you might write for a college essay, for example. You can just jump right into the answer. So if they say, what diversity do you bring to our program? I would bring diversity in the following ways. You can just jump right into it, list those ways, for example, and then go into more detail. So you don't have to have that more traditional essay structure to answer these questions. You can just jump right into answering the question right away. If it's something longer like the 500-word essay, then maybe you could have more of a traditional introduction. But again, we can help you figure out all of that. Trying to think of some other prompts that are tips and strategies. But does anyone have any other questions, concerns? Have you already looked at secondaries or supplementals?
I've heard a lot of people talk about this, but can you talk about the strategy again about submitting like one school, getting it verified, and then, or I
Mhm.
kind of understand the process, but I don't really get it. Can you just like talk about it again?
Yeah, definitely. So that's what I mentioned a few slides ago, but I'll go back to here. Um, so you can, because you're applying for MD and DO, that's right. Or no, Awantika, are you just applying for MD? I can't remember. I think so. I think that's what you said in the comments. So for that, then, yeah, you can submit your application for MD schools with just one school. You don't even need to have your MCAT score. I think you already took your MCAT, but for anyone who hasn't taken it, you can submit your primary application with um, just the things that are required of that, which would be your personal statement, your experience descriptions, um, and some of the like the basic demographic or personal information. But you don't need your MCAT score, and you also don't need any of your letters of recommendation to be in at that point. Um, I believe you would need to have put in the names of the people that you want to ask for your letters of rec, but they don't need to have submitted the letters yet. Um, but or so you can submit with just those things, and then during the time that you're getting verified, then most of the time people are waiting to get MCAT scores back if they haven't submitted them yet, or they're going to take them during that time. um, but then, so all you need is that one school in order to get verified, and then that gets you in uh, in the mix, I guess, with everybody else. So that once you get verified, um, then you would get probably that one secondary coming back. But you can also start adding more schools. I think you can still add more schools during the verification process, but at least you can press that submit button. Um, I'm sure that we've mentioned this before in app prep, but we'll probably mention it again too. You do not need to apply the first day, especially for MD schools, to be competitive. Because again, all they're doing from May 27th to June 27th is verifying your transcript. And no medical school will see anything until June 27th at the earliest. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, okay. That's starting to make sense. Got it.
Yeah, I know it's a confusing process, but and that does go for most of the other health professions as well. So, like I was saying, you can apply with just one school, get verified, and then add more schools later. And does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So I already applied last cycle, and so I'll probably have
Mhm.
to apply again. For the schools that it would be like my second time applying, for the
Mhm.
secondaries, should they be like completely different in case that I do receive them, or am I able to sort of adjust or like adapt them just according to, like I'm sure there's like new experiences or like new ways that I can answer
Mhm.
the question, but
Yeah,
yeah.
we would definitely recommend at least revisiting them. You might change a couple of reflections or change a few sentences, or you might just overhaul the whole thing. It's really up to you, but you can definitely meet with us to see, how was the answer from last year? Did it address the prompt in the way that the school was looking for, or can we think of another way to address it? And then we can make changes as needed. But for some people, it's kind of recycling the same information, but with a couple of tweaks here and there. And some people, it's just starting over completely. It just kind of depends.
Okay.
And that goes for anyone reapplying in terms of your personal statement and or your experience descriptions too. It's just a good thing to revisit them and see if you have new perspectives or new stories that you could tell as well. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to wrap up there and just do a quick plug for HPA. And please do make appointments with us. If you don't see an appointment available, please do also come to drop-ins. They are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Tuesdays, they're from 10 to 12, Wednesdays from 11 to 1, and Thursdays from 1 to 3. And those appointments, the 15-minute appointments, they open up at 8 a.m. the same day. And you can find all that information through this QR code. And of course, if you have any quick questions, you can always give us a quick call. But we definitely hope to see all of you in appointments and in our drop-ins.